Okay.
So I guess one of my first questions would be, you didn't have to do this because it's not mandatory, but did any of you write out what I call the parenthetic chord in section 1 of the homework? Was that the pivot chord? You tried it and you failed? So, let's see if I can find it, my copy here. There it is. So I had it on the board last class. The pivot chord is a C flat minor chord. And I would want you to either spell it as a C flat minor chord correctly, as C flat, E double flat, G flat, or I would want you to spell it as a B minor chord, which it is enharmonic with, as B natural, D natural, F sharp, or you could, like I said last class, you could actually write it both ways, spell it in the old key as C flat minor chord, and then in parentheses put the enharmonic spelling as the B minor chord, and then the B minor spelling I find it helps me visually see and how to part right to the next chord, which is going to be B minor in the following measure. Okay. So although it's not required, I kind of have mine. Like this. I have my C flat minor chord right here, and then I have my B minor chord here. And then I think I changed the key signature. Okay. And then I have in B minor, I have the E minor chord that starts this measure right here. And it helps me to see how to get from this chord to this chord if I spell this pivot chord enharmonically in the key of B minor. So you can put that in your section 1 of your homework to help you see how to part right. Again, you don't have to, but I mean, for me, it's kind of hard for me to see how an E double flat, like I have in the bass here, will go to E natural in the bass over here. This looks kind of funky, kind of unwieldy to me. All right, so that was one thing I wanted to double check and ask you. I know there are some questions regarding the back side of the homework. So let's go ahead and maybe address some of those right now. This was the analysis. You had 2 short analysis passages to check out.
I want to do the second to last measure in just both examples.
In both examples. The second to last one. Okay. Well, actually, I have the same Roman numerals for both those measures. In the first example, I modulated from D major to F sharp minor. And the second to last measure in that example, I have 164 going to 57 in F sharp minor. And then in the bottom example, I modulated from A minor to G sharp minor. And in the second to last measure, I have a 164 also going to 57. Okay. G sharp minor, you're going to have the 164 chord. You have a G sharp in the top voice. You have some D sharps, and then you have a B natural. That makes a G sharp minor. And then in the next chord over here, you have D sharp, F double sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, which actually helps spell a D sharp major minor 7th, or D sharp dominant 7th chord, which would be a 5-7 in the key of G sharp minor. So I think if you got the chords in the pivot chord, the rest of it was not supposed to be very tricky. The rest of it was supposed to be just pretty much a standard cadence. Because after these measures, then you just have one, I think, in both cases. So it's just pretty much a standard cadence after you get the pivot chord, after you figure out how it shifts from one key to the next. And just so you know, the pivot chord for this one in G sharp, it is E, and I'm not going to put it exactly in order, G sharp, B, and D. And that's a 5/7 in the old key of A, right? What's on beat 4? What's the deal with this C double sharp that comes along? Is C double sharp a note that's any different than B? Well, it's just a repeated note. That's all it is in the alto. It's the same note. Just that harmonically spelled. So E, G sharp, B, C double sharp, which sounds the same as E, G sharp, B, D, that is going to be a German 6 in the key of G sharp minor. In fact, maybe if I played some of these examples on the back side of the homework, your ear might be able to convince you and say, oh yeah, that's really not that strange. So let me start with the one on the bottom there, the one in A minor. So we have this kind of sound. It's just a repeated note in the alto, that's all it is, the same thing. And then it goes to so it was this. It's not resolving as a 5/7 in A minor, which would be here, but it's resolving as a German 6 in G sharp minor, which takes me to here. And then maybe I can play the top one too. The top one is in D major. And I have that's nice. I'm sorry, that's not nice. Let's try it from the beginning. So it's the chord on beat 4 of measure 2 in the top example. That's going to be your pivot chord.
I
Yep.
have a question on the page.
Okay.
The second exercise, the German 6 in F sharp.
Okay, I think I see that here. So section 2, the German 6 in F sharp minor. All right, let's take a look at that one. Okay, so starting out for that one in the treble clef, and we have F sharp minor's key signature, and we have a German 6 in that key, which is D, F sharp, A, and B sharp, or lay, do, may, and fi. And I forget, mine's an old copy. How do I actually word the instructions here? Complete the exercises below. Rewrite all necessary accidentals. So I need to respell this German 6 as a 5/7. And when I do, it should be a 5/7 in a completely different. So what was the main way I talked about last class how to do that? What you can do is you can just respell the pitch phi of the German 6 and harmonic. So if I respell B sharp and harmonically, what note do I play? C major, that's right. So So all the other pitches stay the same, D, F sharp, A, but I have to put an accidental on here, because otherwise it would be C sharp from the key signature. Okay. So D, F sharp, A, C, you see that as a 5/7 hundreds of times probably throughout our theory classes here. In what key is that a 5/7? G. Yeah. And you can choose G major or G minor, because both would be real existing keys. So I would accept either G major or G minor. The first one, the one right before? Okay. Let's take a look at that one. Here we're starting in E flat major. And the chord that they give us is already a chromatic chord. C, E natural, G, B flat. Well, I have to wrap my brain for how to analyze this chromatic chord in E flat. And it's not going to be, as I said, it's not going to be a regular diatonic chord. It looks like it's a dominant seventh sound, a major minor seventh chord. So it looks like it's going to be a 5/7 of something into E flat. Does anyone know what it's a 5/7 of? It's a 5/7 of 2. Because C, the root, is a dominant to F, and F in this key would be the root of 2. So that's the first cap. Now, I need to respell the 5/7 as a German 6. And when I do that, it'll be a German 6 in a completely different key than E flat major. Okay, so the best way to do that is to just take the 7th of the 5/7 chord, the top note here, and respell that pitch and harmonic, leaving all the other pitches the same. So C, E natural, G, and how do I spell B flat and harmonic? A sharp. This is now spelled as a German 6. And since it is a German 6, that means this note is lay, this note is do, this note is may, and this note is fi. I can see that what the key is because E natural is do. So what key should you have here? I would accept okay, E major or E minor. Either one is fine.
Curiosity question. So just kind of looking at like the stuff that we did and the stuff on here, is there a reason that the keys are always a half-step apart?
Yeah, we can talk about that later this class.
Okay.
I'm hoping to have time to give you a handout, and in the process of actually looking at the handout, I'm going to try to tell you and show you how the keys are very often either half-step away from each other, either half-step higher or half-step lower. So hang on to that question. I hope to get to that before we finish.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Anything else on the homework before we move on? Okay. Oh, yes.
Yeah, it's about finding the German 6 on the first example of part 3. I
Okay.
know that you said it was on B4 measure 2. I'm still really confused.
Okay. So B4 of measure 2 in this example, the top example, we're coming in D major. And it looks like the notes that I have at that point, I'm going to try to just cram them in up here. I have D in the bass, you see that? Okay, I have an A in the tenor, you see how that's holding from the very first beat? Okay, and then I have on beat 4 in the alto, I have a C natural. And then up in the soprano, I have an F sharp. D, F sharp, A, C. Because it's got a C natural, it is a chromatic chord in the first key, but it's going to be one of these secondary dominant sevenths. Okay? So can anyone tell me D F sharp A C in the key of D, that's a 5/7 of what? 4, yeah. It's a 5/7 of the G major chord. And the G major chord in this key is a 4 chord. So that's the top half of my pivot chord. This is to be beat 4. In fact, you could analyze beat 3 and beat 4 measure 2 all as one chord if you wanted to. That's fine. All right, now the trick is, how do we see this? How can we envision this chord as a German sixth? Well, if we take, which note do we respell? Yeah, if we just think of the C natural, we spelled enharmonically, because remember that's the seventh, D, F sharp, A, C, the top. The seventh of the chord we respell enharmonically. That would give us D, F sharp, A, B sharp. And this is a German sixth in, well, how do you find the key? Lay, do, may, be. Here's do. Okay, so it's got to be a German sixth in the key of F sharp. How did I know it's F sharp minor? Well, because the following chords here are minor F sharp chords, not major. So, does that kind of help you see how it works both ways?
Yeah.
It can only be spelled correctly one way in the music. And it happens to be spelled, correctly as a 5/7 of 4 in the old key of D. All we have to do is kind of imagine or envision the C natural enharmonically respelled as B sharp, and then it would be spelled correctly in the new key as a German sixth in F sharp minor. And again, what I did is I actually put right next to the C natural and the alto on B4, I just put in parentheses, I put B sharp. Because that helps me think, oh, that's all it is. You just think of that one note enharmonically and proof it's spelled as a German sixth. So I like to use parenthetic spellings, enharmonic spellings, sometimes of certain pitches, sometimes of entire chords, when I'm dealing with the pivot. So I can see it both ways, or it functions in both keys at the same time. Okay. What I have then, instead of collecting this, I have a copy from your homework half sheet quiz. So let's go ahead and take a few minutes to do that. I won't ask you to obviously copy everything from your homework, just selected parts from each section. So make sure you pay attention to which section the problem I'm asking for an answer. And you should be all right. that on the door. Oh, what? Here is more time in the assignment sheet devoted to the enharmonicism between 5-7 chord and German 6-chord. So luckily we don't have to rush through anything. We're going to talk about the enharmonicism of those two chords today, and then we're going to finish talking about that on Wednesday. And then Friday we'll start talking about the enharmonic potential of the fully diminished self. That's the other chord in music that has the potential to work in different keys if you spell some of the notes enharmonically. But I did say that I wanted to give you a handout on the enharmonicism of the 5-7 and the German 6. So let's take a look at this for a few minutes. This comes from another old theory text, but I think the illustrations are very helpful, so that's why I made a copy of it for you so we can take a look at it. And really, when you get this, we don't have to necessarily read everything on here. I just want to look at the two musical examples down at the bottom of the page, illustration 10.5. You see how the first example, 10.5a, there is a modulation from D minor up to the new key of E flat major. There we go. If you take a look at the two chords, specifically at where these arrows are showing up at the top, the very first chord of the passage is a German 6 in D minor, and resolves as a German 6 should in D minor, total potential 164. This chord over here at the end of measure 1, this chord with the arrow sounds identical to the very first chord, but it is spelled enharmonically as a 5-7 in E flat, and it resolves differently than this chord did. This one over here resolves as a 5-7 in E flat, and so that takes us, that has the potential to take us to the new key of E flat major. Okay? The only difference between these two chords is the spelling of the soprano pitch. Here, this one is spelled as G sharp. The soprano pitch of this chord is spelled as A flat. But the two chords sound identical. And because we heard the sound of the chord resolve as a German 6 here, when we hear that same chord sound again, we expect it to resolve as a German 6 again. But no, our expectations have been pleasantly thwarted or misdirected, and it resolves as a 5-7 chord in the key of E flat. Okay? So, I'll go to the piano and play this passage for you so you can hear the two different resolutions of the same chord. And again, we only know how the composer is interpreting the chord enharmonically based on the way it resolves. So, same chord again, different resolution. The bottom example of 10.5 is the same two keys, but the process is reversed. So you can see in the bottom example, we start in the key of E flat major, and the chord in question is spelled as a 5-7 in E flat, and it resolves that way. Then once again, the chord, the same sound, identical sound, reappears at the end of measure 1. This time it's spelled as a German 6 and resolves as a German 6 chord in the key of D. that is to a 164 in the key of D. Okay? So, let's listen to this one, and you'll hear how we go back from E flat major back to D minor. Okay, starting in E flat major, start out with a good old 5/7. Same chord again, but different resolution. Ended up in D minor. Now, are D minor and E flat major closely related keys? No, because E flat major has two more flats in its key signature than D minor does. D minor has one flat, E flat major has three flats in its key signature. One thing I did want to show you though, and now this is getting to the question that we had before, and that is, do you notice that the two keys involved here are a half step apart, a half step away? Well, it turns out that when the German sixth is on the top of the enharmonic pivot chord and the 5/7 is on the bottom, we find out that the new key is a half step higher than the old key. Okay? When it's flipped around, when we have the let's put it this way, when the German sixth is on the bottom of the pivot chord, enharmonic with a 5/7, we find out that the new key is a half step lower all the time. So, I try to remember this just as basically, in what position is the German sixth of the pivot chord? If the German sixth is on the top, you're going to go to be a half step higher, up. If the German sixth is on the bottom of the pivot chord, you're going to go to a key that's a half step lower or down. So to me, that's all dependent on where is the German sixth in the pivot chord. Is it on the top or the bottom? If it's on the top, you're modulating up a half step. If it's on the bottom, you modulate down a half step. That we can say, that much we can say is true. Now, if we have something like we had on the homework, and I remember exactly what it was, I don't even need to use keys. But for instance, if you have something like this, we cannot be guaranteed to say that the two keys are going to be a half step away. Because this is a completely different chord than a regular 5/7. It's got a different root. Therefore, this is going to have a different root than what it would in this case. And so you just kind of have to wait and see what chord or what key do you modulate to when you have a secondary 5/7. But when you have a regular 5/7 alternating enharmonic with the German sixth, we can tell that the two keys will be a half step apart. We just can't say that for certain when you have a 5/7 of 2, or 5/7 of 3, or 5/7 of 4 as part of the pivot chord. Any secondary dominant seventh is going to lead you to a different key that's probably not a half step away. Okay? Yeah. The reason for this is because the German sixth is enharmonic with a 5/7 on the Neapolitan. I don't know if you care to know that. But if you have the 5/7 of a Neapolitan, you're going to go into a key a half step away because the root of the Neapolitan is just a half step above there. It's kind of explained a little bit on the page if you want to get, we don't have to get that technical, but anyway. Okay, now, I'd like to go through a few more spelling problems of turning a 5/7 enharmonically into a German sixth and vice versa. Let's try over here. Okay, let's try, we'll use one of the keys that you had on the homework assignment for today. The good old key of G sharp minor. which has 5 sharps in its key signature. And let's start out with this chord here. It's not a G sharp minor chord, it's actually a G sharp major minor 7th. G sharp, B sharp, D sharp, F sharp. How would I analyze this, the way it's spelled, how would I analyze this in the key of G sharp minor? Five, 7 off, right? Let's turn this chord into a German 6 in a completely different key. What's the way that we've learned how to do that? Which of these which of these 4 pitches do I have on these? The 7th, the F sharp. Oh boy, F sharp enharmonically spelled as an E is going to be what? Okay, I like that. E double sharp. Ooh. Okay. This is spelled as a German 6, but based on where Do is, in what key would this be a German 6? Say again? Yeah, B sharp, right? B sharp is Do. Is B sharp a key? Whether it's major or minor? No, so we can't have a final answer of a fake key. And I think I was trying to get a little bit at this last class, but now I officially want to do this. What happens when you end up respelling it and it turns out to be a chord in a key that doesn't exist, not a real key? Okay, then what you do, you don't panic, first of all. You just enharmonically respell every single note of what you got. And it'll put it in an enharmonic key. An enharmonic key of a fake key will always be a real key. Okay? So, can you help me enharmonically respell every note? G sharp enharmonically respelled is A flat, B sharp is C natural, D sharp is E flat, and E double sharp is F sharp. Now, what key is this a German 6 in based on how it's spelled? C. Is that not enharmonic with the fake key of B sharp? Okay. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is when you're going from 5/7 to German 6 and vice versa, do only respell the one note we talked about. If you're going from a 5/7 to a German 6, just enharmonically respell the 7th of the 5/7. If you end up getting a chord that's spelled correctly in a key that doesn't exist, don't panic. Because you know that the trick is, if you respell every single note of a chord enharmonically, it's going to get to be spelled correctly in an enharmonic key. And the enharmonic key of a fake key will be a real key. Okay? Let's try one more of these. And I think I want to go to F sharp minor. Let's just get a standard 5/7 here. Let's say you have a problem like this on the test. Let's respell the 5/7 as a German 6. What's the procedure? Which note do I just respell enharmonically? The 7th. Okay. So that's a B. I respell that enharmonically, leave the other notes the same. And I've got, whoa, B enharmonic is a double sharp. In what key, real or fake, I don't know yet, but in what key is this spelled correctly as a German 6? E sharp, yuck. Gave me with a spoon. No, so we're not going to leave that as our final answer. Enharmonically respell every single note of this German 6. C sharp enharmonic is D flat. E sharp enharmonic is F natural, I think. G sharp enharmonic is A flat. And A double sharp enharmonic is B natural. Now, that's a bona fide, good-looking German 6, and it exists in a real key. What key does that exist in? F. And I would accept F major or F minor, because both are real keys. And that's my final answer. Because on a test or a quiz, I can't leave my final answer to be something in a fake key. And the chord really should be spelled correctly in the key of your final answer. Okay? Don't like say, oh, I'm going to just respell a few of these notes enharmonically and say C sharp, E sharp, A flat, B natural. No, it makes no sense. Okay, did I lose anyone here? Okay, the last thing I guess I want to do is I want to show you one example out of the book, because I think this uses it's a good example to show you the potential of the enharmonic possibilities of the 5/7 sonority / German 6 sonority to lead in two different directions to two completely different keys. This is a diagram that's found on page 406 in your book. It's example 23.6. And notice that at the beginning of this example, we've got G major, we've got 1, 5, 6, 5, 1, and then there's a 5, 7, and 4. It's at that point that the musician or the composer is in control. He or she can say, do I want to resolve the 5, 7, and 4 as a 5, 7, and 4 and go to 4, which would take me up to the top one and keep me in the same key of G? Or, when we get to the 5, 7, and 4, since that's a dominant 7 sound and that's enharmonic with the German 6, the composer, he or she can say, oh, do I want to mess with the listener's minds? Do I want to pleasantly thwart their expectations? And do I want to resolve it as a German 6 would? So it's there at that moment, the composer or the musician has control. A 5, 7, and 4, the book says, is enharmonic. The 5, 7, and 4 in G is enharmonic with a German 6 in B. Do you see how they just respelled the F natural on top as an E sharp? So, is it going to resolve as a 5, 7, and 4 to a 4 in the same key of G? If so, we go up here. Is it going to resolve as a German 6 would in B? If so, we go down this way. And you can't tell which way the composer is interpreting that sonority, that sound, until the resolution happens. And you can tell which way it resolves and which key you get in. So if I play this in G, we have, and then I go up the top way and stay in G, I resolve it as a 5, 7, and 4 would. Nothing really out of the ordinary. But when we resolve this as a German 6 would and I get this, and I get to this really bright, unexpected key, all of a sudden, wham, but it's very loud. Isn't that neat? Again, I think that's very neat. You don't know, which way am I going? Am I going this way? Or from here, am I going this way? Right? I have your next homework assignment, worksheet 3. This has a part writing example at the top. I have given you figure bass, but I've also given you the bass and the the soprano. All you need to do is fill in the inner voices. This passage modulates using the enharmonic 5/7 / German 6. Okay? When you realize the figured bass, hopefully you'll find out where that figure chord is. Then down on the bottom, there's just some, oh, I forgot to tell you. If you look at your assignment sheet, this is worksheet 3. Do you see how worksheet 3, the front side is, due on Wednesday, but the back side is not due till Friday? We're going to work on this worksheet for the remainder of the week. So, I'm not going to collect it next time, but I would recommend that you work on the front side because we know how to do all that stuff. Then on Wednesday's class, I'm going to teach you a little bit more about these German 6/5/7 chords, and then you can work on the back side for Friday. So it's a kind of a 2-day assignment. It's not due until in full. It's not due until Friday.
Yeah, and some of them I did have